So bright. There you go. No, I didn't want that. What do you mean that's not available? Well, I can't see the live chat. Hopefully it doesn't... Hopefully it fixes itself soon. Then I won't be able to see comments. Crud. Oh wow. It's okay. I'll live. Hello and welcome to the Streaming Parson Reads the Canterbury Tales. I blanked out there for a second. Let me try that again. Hello and welcome to the Streaming Parson Reads the Canterbury Tales on this lovely Good Friday. And I know it'd be like tradition to do like some Good Friday kind of message, but I've already done. I've done like twice already on this channel, so you can maybe scroll through the backlog of all that and find those if you want to get a good Good Friday message from me. But today we're gonna read The Sergeant's Tale from the Canterbury Tales. It's gonna take a little while, so we're gonna try and do this on one stream. I know I'm a little late today, because I was caught up with a buddy. We just talk about something like, oh shit, it's already like 3:30. So we're just gonna dive right into it. Hey Chris, welcome to the stream. You went to a feminist Discord to debate them. Man, they did not like me one bit. Well, I mean, if you want, I mean, there's no way of saying this without it being like mega hot take, but I can't remember who said it. But basically, you can't really debate people who are very ideologically charged, like feminist. And even like your fundamentalist Christians are kind of like this too. Where, so it's on both sides. It's not just feminists that do this, but feminists are super bad at this. And because they're so ideologically charged, they're not there to discuss ideas. They're there to preach to you and tell you what to think. And of course the reason why most people don't buy into feminism, especially any rational person in the modern era, is because not only are these people just so ideologically charged that you're not having discussions with these people. They just want to indoctrinate you. And worse off is that not only are they trying to indoctrinate you, they're trying to tell you to do something that they themselves don't do. I mean, it's the exact same thing, and to, you know, let's turn it on the other side so I'm not just crapping on feminists. But, you know, one thing that Jesus accused the religious leaders of his time was he would say to them, like, you tell people how to approach God, and you try to be their instructors on how to approach God, but you yourselves don't do this. You yourselves are more concerned with your image rather than righteousness. And so Jesus just harped on the religious leaders of his time of the same thing that feminists do today, which is they just tell people what to do, but they themselves don't live up to it. And the word, we have for this is a hypocrite. Of course, feminists are hypocrites, massive hypocrites too. But I guess it's not just hypocrisy, but once again, it's this whole ideological judgment that they have. And so a feminist isn't there to discuss or debate ideas. They view themselves as being moral arbiters and being above everyone else in how they think. And so you can't discuss ideas because in their minds, they're convinced that they know better than you do. So you can't go to them and discuss a new idea. They just want you to fall in line. And that's kind of the mindset that they have, and it's super terrible because if people are unwilling to discuss ideas, that's what caused social stagnation, which is where we've come to. And of course what happens is people lose the ability to start thinking for themselves. People don't think for themselves, and instead will just go to the loudest how do I put it, the loudest ringleader. And then that's how, everybody just becomes part of the cult of weakness is what we have in the world today. Is this cult of weakness that we have. And feminists are at the forefront of that cult. And it's this weird cult that we have that worships being weak and submissive. Which is ironic, isn't it? Because I thought the whole thing that feminists claim to be advocating for was for women to not be so submissive to the patriarchy or any of those overarching systems. But yet, what they expect is your submission. It's ironic. But, once again, it's not about feminism isn't about helping women. It's about controlling people. Most cults are like that. They claim to advocate for something, like a people group or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're just about controlling people like they always have been. See, because the chat box thing here is all messed up, I have to look at the screen here. Yes, like tricksters, medieval jesters who know better than rulers, I assume is what you wrote there. But you missed the R in rulers. Like tricksters who know more than their rulers. Well, trickster is a little different, right? Because the point of a trickster is to balance out the stress that a king goes through. Because being a king actually sucks a lot, actually. And so the reason why they kept court jesters around was to kind of lighten the mood all the time. Which is the purpose of comedy. That's why we have comedy. And the reason why, another hot take, but the reason why, you think of traditional comedy, like the greatest comedy act of all time, Eddie Murphy's Delirious. And now, Eddie Murphy has since disowned a lot of his own stuff in that act because of how, insensitive it was. But, what makes good comedy is that it's meant to be offensive. And the reason why good comedy is meant to be offensive is because it's meant to take very sensitive subject matter and point at its absurdities. And then we can laugh at those absurdities and move forward as a society. That's the point of comedy. And so jesters in the ancient courts were kind of that, but on very small scales, because, you don't have, there's no such thing as, a comedian going from place to place telling the same jokes and making millions off of that. That idea didn't exist back then. But the point of that was because a king's life was pretty stressful and had to deal with a lot of the Dark Ages were called the Dark Ages for a reason. And part of that was, there was a lot of social issues, very dark social issues that had to be addressed. And people didn't know a damn thing how to deal with it. Which is the reason why we needed the Enlightenment and the Renaissance so badly. Was because there was a lot of problematic social issues during the medieval period. But people didn't have any idea how to deal with them. People were just so inept. And this is the real reason why we call it the Dark Ages, because people were just so lost and confused in the political climate of that time. They didn't know what to do. They had no idea. But the point of the court jester was kind of to lighten the mood with offensive humor. And so there's no different from today. There's no different from today, really. You think about it hard enough. You know, politics will always be grimy. There'll always be difficult social issues to tackle in day-to-day living. But sometimes you need to find a way to laugh past the pain. Because if you don't laugh past the pain, you end up being stuck in it. And that's the modern talking point of people who like the modern approach to trauma. And instead of like overcoming trauma, we're in this culture of like that worships weakness, and instead of like trying to overcome your trauma, it's like embrace your trauma and be one with it, and it's a defining part of you, which it is, but we are required to move on from that. You know, a good example of this, not to just shit like crap on feminists, because there's a lot of non-feminists that also do the same thing as feminists do in this whole like worship of weakness. But the incels are basically that. I could make a safe guess of like 90% of incels. There's no studies behind this idea, but I think it's safe to assume this, that 90% of incels are just people, or just guys who don't know how to deal with like the trauma of being rejected. That's what it is. That's what it is. And so, because they have zero idea on how to overcome that trauma, they're just stuck and paralyzed in it. And then they don't know how to get out. And no one is. And then what makes it worse is that no one is willing to help them get out. And that's the other thing too that makes, you know, any of these ideologies, whether we're talking about feminism or incelhood or whatever, what makes them so problematic is that the reason why we don't get past these problems is because really at the end of the day no one really wants to help each other. That's just how it is. Nobody really wants to help each other and actually like help each other and try and build community. Now of course, you know, take this with a grain of salt, but I mean that was why like we had community centers and churches, and that was a primary function of those places, was to create the environments of where people could live life together and like help each other when times are tough. You know, I read this post on Reddit, and it's one of those like, are you really this like stupid? But there's a lot of people that talk about how like the show Friends, and how like Friends is not funny. It's not just because like the jokes back then were insensitive to our modern ears or things like that. No, the show was just never funny. And I thought about that for a moment, like, well, that's not the point of Friends. The point of Friends is not just to be a comedy. The point of the show Friends was to be a drama about a group of friends living together and trying to survive in the world that they lived in, and how to deal with the change of culture as like 30 some odd year olds in the 90s. The point of Friends was to see how these people related to each other. Hence the title of the show, right? Friends. That's the point of the show. And the point of what makes Friends actually a good show is that you see these people and how they interact with each other, and all the mistakes they make, and all the imperfections that they learn to accept from each other, I think is what the show is really about. And so the show is like, once again, every show has to throw in jokes from here to there, but I wouldn't focus too much on like Friends' lack of comedy. It's not the comedy bit that really makes that show good. It's it's dealing with the reality of needing each other, and how the six of them stuck it out, even in like the most terrible of situations in their lives. They stuck it out for each other, and that's what Friends is about. And that's something that we've kind of lost in a lot of TV. And why like sitcoms were good for a while is because, once again, the point of a sitcom, sure, sitcoms can be funny. Because, of course, in a sitcom, the characters are exaggerated from how, real people behave. But, and the exaggerations are what's funny. But at the end of the day, the purpose of a sitcom is to see how people live their lives. And, of course, by extension, how we ought to live our lives. That's the point. And so, I know I've digressed quite a bit, but going back to when you go to like dealing with like feminists or anyone who's heavily ideologically charged, the biggest problem that they have is that that connection with people is lost. Because, once again, these people are focused on the ideology, not actually relating to people. And so, that's why debates don't happen in those spheres, because they're not interested in knowing what you think. They care about a concept, and that concept must have dominance, as opposed to caring about real people. And I think that's a real shame, but that's just kind of how it is that, yeah, there's a lack of respect for life and to actually communicate with people. I mean, if you want the mega's hottest take, and we're gonna do it because it's Good Friday, so if Good Friday is as good a day as any to get canceled. But if you want to see one of the biggest like nonsensical like paradoxes within like the feminist thinking world, is if feminists really cared about helping women, no feminist in their right mind would advocate for abortion. Yeah, I went there. No feminist in their right mind would do that. Now, whether you want to try and make claims about like health care or whatever, if you think about it, if we really wanted to try and make abortion a moral good, at the end of the day, you know who loses out if abortion is normalized and accepted? The people who lose out the most are women. Because think about it. Who are the people that it actually benefits? Benefits big pharma, so part of the patriarchy. It benefits asshat guys who go around sleeping with girls and then don't want to pay any consequence. Those are the people that it actually benefits. It does not benefit women. Hardly. And of course, you read statistically, there's a documentary, and it's super sad to watch. I mean, on one hand, it's super informative, and you should watch it. But at the same time, I could not bear to watch it again, so I don't know if I would ever have anyone else watch it. But the documentary, It's a Girl, is a documentary about how, in reality, the biggest victims are essentially like baby girls. And the whole It's a Girl thing was treated like a death sentence, because of course in a lot of places where they value like having sons, then if they have a daughter, it's kind of like, oh shit, all that honor is gone, so we're just gonna abort the kid and try having a son with the next one. And that's really messed up thinking. But once again, it's women who lose out. So if feminists really cared about like helping women, they sure as hell would not be advocating something like that. I know, super hot take. If I get canceled tomorrow, whatever. Good Friday is as good a day as any to get canceled. But anyway, I've been rambling about non-Canterbury Tales stuff for the last 15 minutes, so we're going to change that and start reading the Canterbury Tales. And today we're going to be reading the Sergeant's Tale. Now, to get you up to speed a little bit, what happened earlier in the story was the first few tales that were being told among the characters. It quickly, similar to some of these streams sometimes, it quickly dived out of what the host of the storytelling game wanted into just people telling dirty jokes and talking bullshit, basically. Because the first tale we had the knight, and he told like this fancy chivalric story. And then we had like 3 guys all tell stories about dudes getting cocked. Like, oof. We went from idealism to dudes getting cocked, like, faster than Fireball goes from 0 to 150. And so, the sergeant is like, okay, like, we're gonna try and get back on track here. Let's tell, like, actual good stories. So that we're not just, like, telling fart jokes and cuck stories the whole time we're on this journey. Let's try and have some class. And so that's where the sergeant steps in. After, I think it was, we had the miller, the reeve, and the cook. And they all just kind of told, like, cuck stories. But the sergeant's like, no, we're changing that now. So here we go. Our host perceived that the bright sun had completed a quarter, plus half an hour or so, of the arc it travels in rising and setting. So it's still like probably like 3 o'clock in the afternoon or something. And though not deeply learned in the art, he knew it was the 18th day of April, the harbinger of May. And he observed that the shadow of each tree was the same length as the vertical body casting it. From the shadow he could estimate that Phoebus, shining so bright and clear, had climbed to a height of 45 degrees, and thus taking the date in latitude into consideration, concluded it was 10 o'clock. Okay, so not 3 o'clock. For some reason, the whole, like, time thing, I thought it was 3 o'clock. Suddenly, he turned his horse. "Oh, sirs," he said, "I warn you, all of you, a 4th part of the day has already gone." See, that's the part that confused me. If you're saying a fourth watch is past, that would be later in the day, not 10 o'clock in the morning. "Now, for the love of God and St. John, let's waste no more time if we can help it. Gentlemen, time wastes away day and night with what are private slumbers and negligence when awake. It steals away like the unreturning stream that descends from the mountain to the plain. Well, may Seneca and the philosophers lament the loss of time more than a chestful of gold. For as he said, lost wealth may be recovered, but lost time confounds us. You may be sure it won't come back, any more than wanton Molly's lost maidenhood. So let's not moulder away in idleness like this. Now, Master Sergeant at Law," he went on, "as you hope for heaven, tell us a tale according to our bargain. You freely promised to stand by my decision in this matter. Now keep your promise, then. At least you will have done your duty." I don't know if you guys can hear that. You probably can. But, oh well, you just gotta deal with it. "Good host," the sergeant replied, "I swear I'm perfectly willing. I've no intention of backing out. A promise is a promise, and I'll gladly keep mine. I can't say fairer than that. By rights, they that made laws should not break them, as the saying is. Nevertheless, I'm pretty sure that I can't tell any worthwhile tale on the spur of the moment that hasn't already been told long ago, as most people know by Chaucer, unskillful as he is with rhyme and meter, in such English as he commands. And if he hasn't related them in one book, my dear fellow, it's because he told them in another, for he has recounted stories all about sorts of lovers, more than Ovid mentioned in those old epistles of his. Why should I repeat them when they've already been told? In youth he wrote the Six of Halcyon. Since when he was celibate, every one of those noble ladies and their lovers, anyone who pleases can look out that huge tome of his called The Legend of Good Women. Now there you may read about the wide and gaping wound of Lucrece, of Thisbe of Babylon, Dido dying her sword for false Aeneas, Phyllis hanging from a tree because of Demophon, the lament of Dengenira, of Hermione, of God, these names, Ariadne, and of Hypsipyle. God, these names, Hypsipyle. The barren island standing in the sea. Leander drowned for his hero. The tears of Helen, the grief of Briseis, and of Laodamia, the cruelty of Queen Medea, with her little children hanged by the neck because Jason was false. Obligatory water noise, just hold on. Okay, I think the noise is gone now. And Hypernestra, Penelope, Aeschylus, he celebrated their womanhood with the best of them. But he wrote not a single word concerning that disgraceful affair of Cannae and her sinful love for her brother. Shame upon such accursed stories, I say. Nor did he draw from Apollonius of Tyre that story of the criminal king Antiochus, who bereft his daughter of her maidenhood. That tale is too horrible to read, especially the part where he throws her on the pavement. Advisedly, therefore, Chaucer would never write of such unnatural abominations in any of his dissertations, nor will I repeat any if you don't mind. But what shall I do for my tale today? Oh, you may be sure I shouldn't care to be likened to those would-be muses known as the Pierides. But all the same, I don't give a bean of it. Coming after him, my offering seems like baked crab apples. I talk in prose, and I'll leave poetry to him. And with these words he gravely began to tell the following story. Now, the rest of misfortunes is the condition of poverty, confounded by thirst, cold, and hunger. You are shamed to the heart to ask for help, yet so badly hit that if you ask none, sheer necessity uncovers your hidden wound. In spite of all you can do, is indignance forces you to steal, beg, or borrow your keep. You lay the blame on Christ, bitterly observing that he misappropriates worldly riches, or sinfully blame your neighbor, saying he has everything and yourself too little. You swear he'll pay for it one day when he finds his tail burning in the fiery coals because he refused to help the needy in their distress. Now hear what the wise have said. Death is better than indignance. Then your own neighbor will despise you. If you are poor, you lose all respect. And here's another sage observation. All the days of the poor are evil, so take care you are not driven to this pass. For if you are poor, your brother hates you, and all your friends shun you. O you rich merchants, O you worthy, prudent folk, the luck's with you in this case. Your bags aren't stuffed with double aces, but fives and sixes, and runs of luck. You can dance gaily at Christmas when poor men freeze. You scour land and sea for your profits, and likewise, men, keep yourselves informed concerning the condition of different countries. You are a fount of news and of old tales of peace and war. Were it not for a merchant who taught me a tale many years ago, I would be quite out of stories to tell. And now you shall hear it. The Sergeant at Law's Tale. Now there was in Syria at one time a rich company of merchants, sober and honest men, who exported their spices, cloth, richly colored satins far and wide. So novel and cheap was their merchandise, that everyone was eager to sell goods and do business with them. Now it chanced some of these merchants decided to go to Rome, either on business or pleasure. In any case, instead of sending representatives, they themselves went to Rome, where they took lodgings in the quarter that seemed to suit their purposes best. For some time these merchants sojourned at their pleasure in the town, and as it happened, detailed reports of the excellent renown of the emperor's daughter, Lady Constance, came each day to the ears of these Syrian merchants, as I shall tell. And thus ran the common report, "Our Emperor of Rome, may God protect him, has a daughter, and if you reckon upon her goodness with her beauty, there may have been none like her since the world began. Oh, may God sustain her in honor. She deserves to be the queen of all Europe. In her is great beauty, without vanity, youth without wantonness or folly. Virtue guides her every action. In her humility has put an end to all the arrogance. She is the mirror of courtesy. Her heart's a very shrine of holiness, and her hand a liberal instrument of alms." And all this report was true, as God is true. But to return to the story, the merchants finished loading their ships, and when they had seen this blessed maiden, they returned contentedly home to Syria, and pursued their business as before. I can tell you no more than that they lived prosperously ever after. Now these merchants happened to stand well with the Sultan of Syria, for whenever they returned from any strange country, he used to entertain them with generous hospitality, and diligently inquire after the news of various lands, in order to keep himself informed. Among other things, the merchant spoke particularly to him of the Lady Constance, giving a circumstantial account of her great worth with such earnestness that the thought of her captured the Sultan's imagination, and wholly obsessed him till his one desire was to love her to the end of his days. Perhaps at his birth it was written in the stars, in the great book men call the sky, that he would be unlucky and die for love. For in the stars, clearer than glass, is written each man's death, could men but read it. Years before they were born, the death of Hector, Achilles, Pompey, and Julius Caesar, the war of thieves and the death of Samson, Turnus, and Socrates are set down in the stars. But men's wits are so dull that nobody can interpret them fully. The Sultan sent for his privy council, and in short he told them what was on his mind, and said he would die for certain unless he had the luck to win Constance very soon. So he charged them to make haste and devise some means of saving his life. Various counselors made various suggestions. They argued and debated back and forth, bringing forward any number of subtle lines of argument. They talked of magic and conjuration, but in the end concluded they could see no advantage in these means, or in any others except for marriage. And in this, owing the arguments against it, they foresaw great difficulties, because of the difference between the faiths of the two countries. They said they believed no Christian prince would willingly permit his daughter to be wed according to the cherished laws taught them by their prophet Mohammed. But he replied, "Be sure, I will be baptized rather than lose Constance. I must be hers, for I have no choice. Kindly leave off arguing. Try to save my life by seeing to it that you obtain the lady who holds my life in her hands, for I cannot live much longer in this anguish." Now there's no need to expatiate further. I'll only say that by dint of treaties, embassies, and the mediation of the Pope, backed by the entire church and nobility, they agreed to the abolition of idolatry and the spread of Christ's blessed law. Each party swore to keep the following bargain. The Sultan, his nobles, and all his subjects were to be baptized in return for Constance's hand in marriage, together with a certain sum of gold, and I don't know how much that would be. Sufficient surely of this to be provided. And now, fair Constance, may Almighty God be your guide. Now I suppose some people will expect me to describe all the preparations that the Emperor in his magnificence made for his daughter Lady Constance. But you know perfectly well it is impossible to recount in a few words the elaborate arrangements for an occasion so important. Bishops, lords, ladies, famous knights, and plenty of other folk, the list is endless, were appointed to go with her. Everyone in the city was ordered to pray devoutly to Christ that he should bless the marriage and grant a prosperous voyage. The day came for Constance's departure. A fair melancholy day. There could be no more tarrying now, for one and all were ready to embark. Pale and overcome with sorrow, Constance rose and prepared herself to go, for she could see plainly that there was no alternative. What wonder is it if she wept at being sent away from her friends who had cared for her so tenderly to a strange people, to be bound in subjugation to a man whose character she knew nothing of. As wives know, all husbands are good and always have been. I dare not say more. Further, said she, and you your mother, my greatest joy above all things except Christ in heaven. Your wretched child Constance, the daughter whom you so tenderly reared, commends herself once more to your hearts. For I must go to Syria, never again to see you with these eyes. Alas, since you wish it, I must go to the people of Barbary. Damn, that's pretty savage. May Christ who died for our salvation give me the strength to obey his commands. It doesn't matter if I perish, wretched woman that I am. Women are born to suffering and bondage, to live under the domination of men. I say that not even at Troy, when Pyrrhus broke down the wall, before the burning of Ilium, nor at the city of Thebes, nor in Rome, harried by Hannibal, who 3 times vanquished the Romans, was heard so heartbroken a weeping as in that room where she took her departure. But weeping or not, she had to go. I hear a weird noise. I think it's gone. Now at the beginning of this terrible voyage, the Premium Mobile, that unpityingly sphere, whose diurnal motion pressed against all things, hurtling from east to west, what would naturally go in the opposite direction, crowded the heavens into such a disposition that Mars' cruel planet must destroy the marriage. For the sign of Aries, ascending obliquely, presaged misfortune, while cadent Mars, its ruler, thrust helplessly from his angle into Scorpio, the darkest house. Was here a malign influence, with the moon feebly placed? For, having been moved from a favorable position, the moon now stood in an unfavorable conjunction. That imprudent emperor of Rome! Was there no astrologer in this whole city? In case of this kind, it is a matter of indifference what time is set for departure. Is there no choice of astrologically suitable times for starting a voyage, especially when a persons of high rank are concerned, and the hour of their birth is known? Slackness and ignorance is the trouble. With pomp and circumstance, the beautiful and unhappy girl was conducted to the ship. "Now, Christ be with you all," she said, and they departed. "Farewell, fair Constance." And that was all. She did her best to compose her features. Now I shall leave her to sail away while I pick up the threads of my story. That well of evil, the Sultan's mother, perceiving her son's evident purpose to forsake their ancient sacrificial customs, immediately summoned her advisers. When these people had come and assembled together to hear what she had in mind, she took her seat and said, "My lords, you know that my son is on point of renouncing the holy laws of our Alcoran given by Mohammed, the messenger of God. But I make one vow to Almighty God. The life shall quit my breast before the law of Mohammed is torn from my heart. What can this new faith bring us except suffering and bondage for our bodies, and after that to be dragged to hell because we renounce our belief in Mohammed? But my lords, will you swear to do as I say and agree to follow my advice? And I shall make us safe forever." And they swore, every man of them promised to stand by her in life and death, and each as best as he could rallied his friends to her support. Then she began the enterprise I shall describe, and addressed them in this manner. "First we must pretend to become Christians. Cold water won't hurt as much, and I'll prepare such a banquet as well. Settle accounts with the Sultan. Let his wife be baptized never so white. She'll need water by the frontful to wash away the blood. Sultaness, root of iniquity, virago, serpent of female shape, like the serpent fetid in nethermost hell. O treacherous woman, malignant nest of every vice, in whom breeds all that may confound virtue and innocence. O Satan, envious since the day you were chased from your heritage. You know the old road to women too well. You made Eve bring us to bondage. Now you are about to destroy this Christian marriage. When you wish to mislead us, you make women your instrument. More's the pity. The subject of my curses, the Sultaness, secretly dismissed her advisers. Now why prolong the story? One day she rode over to see the Sultan, saying she would renounce her faith and receive baptism at the hand of a priest. She said that she repented having remained a heathen for so long, and besought him to grant her the honor of inviting the Christians to a banquet. "I'll do my best to please them," she said. To this the Sultan replied, "It shall be as you ask." He knelt and thanked her for her request, so pleased that he hardly knew what to say. She kissed her son and rode off home. Just gotta adjust my seating a little bit. Okay. Act 2. The Christians arrived and landed in Syria with a large and illustrious company. the Sultan speedily sent a message to announce his wife's arrival, first to his mother, and then to all the country round. For the honor of the kingdom, he begged the Sultaness to ride to meet his queen. The Syrians and Romans met together in a great and splendidly arrayed congregation. Richly dressed and gay, the Sultan's mother received Constance as fondly as any mother her daughter. They slowly rode in state to the city nearby. I don't suppose that the triumph of Julius Caesar, of which Lucan boasts so much about, could have been more magnificent or elaborate than the assembly of that smiling multitude. Yet for all her blandishment, this malignant ghoul, this scorpion of a sultaness, was preparing to deliver a mortal sting. Soon afterwards, the Sultan arrived in marvelous pomp and welcomed Constance with every mark of happiness and delight. Here I will leave them to their rejoicing. I am only concerned to tell the outcome of the affair. In due course, they thought it proper to end the revels and take their rest. And the time came when the Sultaness fixed the day for the banquet I spoke of. All the Christians, young and old, made themselves ready for the feast. It was a magnificent spectacle, and they feasted upon more dainties than I can describe. But they had to pay for it all too dearly before they rose from the table. Sudden sorrow always succeeds earthly felicity, which is shot through with bitterness. And for grief, the outcome of our delight in all our earthly striving lives at the back of our happiness. Listen to my advice if you want to be on the safe side. Oh, excuse me. In the day of happiness, remember the unexpected sorrow or calamity coming from behind. For in one word, the Sultan and every one of the Christians, with the single expectation of Lady Constance, was stabbed and hacked to pieces at the table. This accursed deed was done by that damnable old crone, the Sultaness, with the aid of her friends. She wanted to rule the country herself. Not one of the converted Syrians in the Sultan's confidence was but hacked to shreds before he could start to his feet. Hastily they seized Constance and put her aboard a rudderless ship, telling her that she could learn to sail home to Italy from Syria. They gave her a certain amount of the treasure she had brought with her, and, to do them justice, a great plenty of provisions. She had clothes also. Thus she set sail upon the salt sea. O Constance, full of loving kindness, the Emperor's beloved young daughter, may he who is the Lord of Fortune be your guide. Crossing herself, she prays with piety to the cross of Christ. O bright and blessed altar, holy cross, red with the compassionate blood of the Lamb that washes away the ancient iniquity of the world, save me from this fiend and his claws upon the day that I shall drown in the deep sea. Victorious tree, protection of the faithful, that alone was worth to bear the newly wounded King of heaven, the white lamb pierced by the spear. Thou hast the power to expel demons from man and woman, over whom they blessed. Guard me and grant me strength to amend my life. For many a year and for many a day she floated over the Grecian sea, till chance brought her to the Strait of Morocco. Many a scant and meagre meal did she eat, and many times look for death, before the wild waves cast her up at the place where she was destined to arrive. Now people may ask why she was not slain with the others at the banquet. Who was there to save her? And to that question I reply, who saved Daniel in the fearsome den where everyone but he, master and slave together, was devoured by lions before they could escape? No one but God, whom he carried in his heart. Through her, God chose to show his miraculous power, that we should see his mighty works. The philosophers know that Christ, who is the sure remedy for all evil, employs chosen instruments for people obscure to human understanding. Our ignorance cannot grasp his wise providence. Yet as she was not slain at the banquet, who saved her from drowning in the waves? Well, who saved Jonah in the fish's maw till he was spat out at Nineveh? As you well know, none other than he who saved the Hebrew people from drowning when they passed with dry feet through the sea. And who commanded the four spirits of the storm to have power to vex the whole earth, north, south, west, and east, vex not a leaf, nor sea, nor land? Surely he who kept that command kept this woman, sleeping or awake, safe from the tempest. Where might she find food and drink? And how did her provisions last 3 years and more? Well, who fed Mary of Egypt in the desert and the cave? Surely none but Christ. For it was a great miracle, as when he fed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. God sent his plenty to her in her need. She was driven forth into the fierce sea of our ocean, till in the end the waves cast her upon a castle whose name is unknown to me. Far in the Northumberland, for those of a tide her ship stuck fast in the sand, it being Christ's will that she should remain there. Oh. Hey, Gauntlets, welcome to the stream. And good afternoon to you. We're just going through one tale for today of the Canterbury Tales. And I hope your day is good as well. Now, where was I? I'll just back up a little bit. Constance was driven forth into the fierce seas of our ocean, till in the end the waves have cast upon her ship onto a castle whose name is unknown to me, far in Northumberland. For the whole of a tide her ship stuck in the sand, it being Christ's will that she should remain there. The constable of the castle came down to see the wreck. He made a thorough search of the vessel and found the woman exhausted with her troubles, and also discovered the treasure that she had brought. In her own tongue she besought his mercy, begging him to take her life and put her out of her misery. Her speech was a kind of corrupt Latin, but she could be understood nonetheless. When the constable had seen enough, he brought the poor woman ashore. She thanked God upon her knees for his aid, but nothing would induce her, for good or ill, to tell anyone who she was. Her wits, she said, had been so mazed by the sea that she had lost her memory. The constable and his wife felt such great compassion for her that they wept for pity. And she was so diligent and unwearied in serving and pleasing everyone there that she was loved by all who looked upon her face. Now the constable and his wife, Lady Hermengild, were pagans, like everyone else in the land. Yet Hermengild came to love Constance dearly. Constance remained there for a long time, giving herself to weeping and prayer, till through the grace of Jesus Christ, the constable's wife was converted. Throughout the land, no Christian dared meet for worship. All the Christian folk had fled from that country because pagans had conquered by land and sea all the regions of the north. Christianity had fled with the Britons, the old inhabitants of the island, to Wales, where they had taken refuge for the time being. Yet the Christian Britons had not been so totally banished that there were some remaining who deceived the heathen and secretly worshipped Christ. 3 such dwelt near the castle. One was blind and could not see except those eyes of the mind which the blind were able to espy. The sun shone bright the summer's day when Constance, together with the constable and his wife, took the direct path to the sea, meaning to amuse themselves and stroll to and fro for a half-mile or so. But on their walk they met this old man, blind and bent, with his eyes shut fast. "Lady Hermegild," cried the old Briton, "in the name of Christ, give me back my sight." Hearing this, the lady grew terrified, fearing her husband would slay her for her love of Jesus Christ. But Constance gave her courage, telling her to perform Christ's will as one of the daughters of his church. Disconcerted by the sight, the constable exclaimed, "What's all this about?" And Constance replied, "Sir, it is the power of Christ that saves people from the snare of the fiend." And she began to expound the faith with such effect that before evening she had converted the constable and made him believe in Christ. Now this constable was by no means the ruler of the place I mentioned. Where he found Constance, he had held it for many years under Allah, king of all Northumberland, who was, as you know, that astute king who curbed the Scots with a hand of iron. Now let me return to my story. Satan, who was always lying in wait to entrap us, saw the perfection of Constance, and cast about to find a means of making her pay for it. He caused a young knight living in the town to fall hotly in love with her, with such lustful passion that he really believed he must perish unless he could have his way with her sooner or later. But when he wooed her, it got him nowhere. She was not to be tempted, and in his fury he schemed to make her die a death of shame. Waiting until the constable was away, one night he crept secretly into Hermegild's chamber while she was asleep. Both Constance and Hermegild were sleeping, weary and tired over their prayer and vigil. Now tempted by Satan, the knight stole up to the bed and cut Hermegild's throat in two. He laid the bloody knife beside Constance and made off. Now may God curse him. Soon afterwards, the constable returned home with Allah, the king of that country, and found his wife cruelly murdered. At this he wept and wrung his hands, and there in bed beside Lady Constance he discovered the bloody knife. Alas, what could she say, driven out of her wits with grief? King Allah was informed of this catastrophe, and also the time and place and all the circumstances in which Lady Constance had been found in the ship, of which you have already heard. The king's heart was shaken with pity at the sight of so good and gentle a creature in such distress and tribulation. Like a lamb led to the slaughter, this innocent stood before the king, while the dishonest knight who had committed the crime falsely maintained she had done it. Nevertheless, there was a great outcry from the people, who declared they could not imagine her capable of so monstrous an act, for they had seen how consistently good she was, and how dearly she loved Hermegild. To this everyone in the house bore witness, save the man who had slain Hermegild with his knife. Yet this witness gave the good king a clue that made him think he should inquire more deeply into the matter to discover the truth. Now Constance had no champion, neither can she defend herself, but he who perished for our redemption and bound Satan, who yet lies where he fell, shall this day be her stout companion. Unless Christ performs an open miracle, though innocent, she must immediately be slain. So Constance went down upon her knees and prayed, O immortal God, who saved Susanna from false accusation, and thou, O merciful Virgin Mary, daughter of Saint Anne, before whose child the angel sings Hosanna, be my succor, if I am guiltless of this crime, or else I die. Now who has not seen at some time a pale face among a crowd, the face of one led to his death after being refused pardon? Such is its color, you can single out the face beset with peril from all the faces in the mob. So Constance looked as she gazed about her. Now all you queens, duchesses, and ladies that dwell in prosperity, take pity upon her adversity. An emperor's daughter stands alone, with none to whom she may turn for sympathy. It is royal blood that stands in jeopardy, its friends far away in this hour of need. But King Allah, since noble hearts are always compassionate, took such pity on her that the tears rained down from his eyes. Quickly, fetch a book, he said, as if this knight will swear that she slew the woman. We will consider our sentence. A British book inscribed with the Gospels was brought. He immediately swore upon the book that she was guilty, and suddenly, in full view of everyone there, a hand smote him upon the neckbone. Down he fell like a stone, both his eyes bursting out of his face, and heard a voice speak. You have slandered an innocent daughter of the Holy Church in the presence of the king. You have done this, and shall I hold my peace? At this wonder the crowd was terrified. All except Constance stood as if stunned, fearing vengeance. So yeah, the guilty knight gets like a magic slap from God, and his eyes fall out of his head. That must have been one hell of a slap. Those who wrongly suspected the saintly innocent Constance were penitent and afraid, because of the miracle. And Constance's meditation in the end had the king and many others there present converted. Now thanks be to Christ's grace. Allah sentenced the dishonest knight to be slain immediately for his perjury. Yet Constance greatly pitied his death. Then in his mercy, Jesus caused Allah to wed this beautiful and saintly maiden with solemn ceremonial. Thus Christ made Constance a queen. But who, to tell the truth, was grieved at this marriage? None other than Donegild, the king's tyrannical old mother. She was so opposed to her son's act that she felt her accursed heart must break in two. That she should take such a foreign creature for his mate seemed to her a dishonor. I'm sensing a bit of a pattern here. I don't wish to spend more time on the chaff and straw of my story than on the grain. Why should I tell of the marriage pomp, the order of the courses, who blew the horn, and who the trumpeters were? It all boils down to this. They ate, drank, danced and sang, and enjoyed themselves. And they went to bed as was right and proper. Wives may be saintly creatures, but at night they must patiently put up with those necessary acts which give pleasure to people who marry them with rings, and for the time being lay aside their saintliness a little. These things can't be helped. For the record, a woman does not lose her saintly nature just because they, to the contrary to, to the contrary, I guess, when you consummate a marriage, that is an act of worship. And so, I know I'm going to a weird end here, but I'm just going to contradict the story a little bit where it's like, no, it's like, it makes it sound like, when, like, Constance gets married to this guy and they consummate their marriage, and it's like, well, you can indulge in a little bit of, like, not being saintly, but I'm like, actually, in reality, kind of be the opposite. But anyway. In time he begot upon her a male child. But when he had to go to hunt down his foes in Scotland, he entrusted his wife to the care of his constable and a bishop. The mild and gentle Constance, being far gone with child, kept quietly to her room and awaited the will of Christ. In due course she bore a boy, whom they baptized Mauritius. Mauritius. The constable summoned a messenger, and wrote to King Allah to give him this good news, and with other urgent tidings. The messenger took the letter and set off. But in the hope of advancing his own interest, he swiftly rode to the king's mother. Courteously saluting her in his own tongue, he said, "Madam, you may rejoice and be glad, and give thanks to God 100,000 times over. My lady the queen has borne a child, to the undoubted delight and joy of the whole country round. See, there are also sealed letters with the news, which I must carry with all haste. I am your servant at all times if you wish to say anything to the king your son." "Not just now," replied Donegild, "but I would like you to rest here for the night. Tomorrow I will tell you what I wish." The messenger drank deeply of ale and wine. While he was sleeping like a pig, his letters were secretly stolen from his box, and another missive concerning the matter, ingeniously forged, addressed to the king as from his constable, was wickedly contrived. This letter said that the queen had been delivered of a fiend-like creature, so horrible that nobody in the castle dare remain there any longer, that the mother was some witch sent by fate or spells or sorcery, that everyone hated her presence. So a fake letter saying that Constance bore a demon baby. When he reads this letter, the king was grief-stricken. Yet he told no one of his heavy sorrow. Instead, he wrote a reply in his own hand. "Let whatever Christ sends be always welcome to me now that I have been taught his doctrine. Lord, let thy will and pleasure be welcome. I place my desires wholly at thy disposal. Keep the child, whether it be monster or no, and my wife also, until my homecoming. When he wills, Christ may send me an heir more to my liking than this one." Hiding his tears, he sealed the letter, which was immediately handed to the messenger, who set off without further ado. That messenger, sodden with drink, with stinking breath, limbs staggering, wits astray, face distorted, and chattering like a jay, he was ready to betray any confidence. Yeah, this messenger sucks. He sounds like Twitter. In any company where drunkenness is the rule, you may be sure no secret can be hidden. As for Donegild, I have no English to do justice to her malice and cruelty, and so I resign her to the devil. Let him celebrate her treachery. That unwomanly, by God I lie, that fiendish spirit, for I swear that though she walked upon earth, her soul was in hell. Now returning again from the king, the messenger arrived at the court of Donegild, who made much of him and entertained him in every way she could. Twitter drank, stuffed his girdle well with wine, then slept as usual, snoring away the night till sunrise. Again all his letters were stolen and forged, one substituted, which ran, "The king commands his constable upon pain and judgment of death, not to suffer Constance on any account to remain in his kingdom. For more than 3 days and a quarter of a tide, he is to put her and the young son and all her gear in the same vessel that he found her in, and thrust her from the land, charging her never to return." Well, might the soul of Constance be afraid and her sleep filled with nightmares, while Donegild contrived this order. When the messenger awoke next morning, he took the shortest way to the castle, and delivered the letter to the constable, who examined it over and over with dismay as he read the grievous missive. "Lord Christ," he said, How may the world survive when there's so much wickedness in its creatures? Almighty God, if it is thy will, how is it, since thou art a righteous judge, that thou wilt suffer the innocents to perish and the wicked to reign in prosperity? Oh, how unhappy I am, good Constance, that I must either be your executioner or die a shameful death. There is no alternative. Now everyone in the place, young and old, wept at the damnable letter sent by the king. On the fourth day, her face deadly and pale, Constance went toward the ships. Nevertheless, she meekly accepted the will of Christ. Kneeling upon the shore, she said, Lord, let me always welcome what thou sendest, he who saved me from false accusation, while I was among you on the land, can keep me from harm and also from shame upon the sea. Even if I do not trust in his dear mother, my sail and rudder both. Her little child lay weeping in her arms. Still kneeling, she said, Hush, hush, little son. I shall do you no harm. And then drawing the kerchief from her hand, she laid it over his little eyes and lulled him in her arms. She cast upon her eyes towards heaven and said, Mary, bright maiden mother, it is true that through a woman's incitement, mankind was lost and condemned to eternal death, for which your child was racked upon a cross. Your blessed eyes saw all his agony, so there can be no comparison between your grief and any that man sustains. You saw your child slain before your eyes, yet my little child still lives. Bright lady, to whom the sorrowful make their cry, glory of womanhood, fair virgin, haven of refuge, O bright star of the day, who, in your gentleness, take pity on the pitiable in their distress. Please take pity on my child. O little child, who never yet sinned, what is your guilt? Why does your hard father want you killed? Have mercy, constable, she said. Only let my baby stay here with you, or if you dare not save him for fear of blame, kiss him just once for his father's sake. Then she looked backward to the land and said, Pitiless husband, farewell. She rose and walked along the strand toward the ship, hushing her baby all the while, with the whole crowd following her. Then she took her leave. Devoutly she crossed herself, and went aboard the ship. Have no fear, but that it was abundantly provisioned to last her a long time. And praise be to God, she had enough of whatever other necessaries she might require. May Almighty God temper the wind and weather and bring her home. Over the sea she drove. I can say no more. So basically, Constance is like the ultimate victim of circumstance. Because, like, damn, that's 2 evil mother-in-laws. Like, to deal with one evil mother-in-law is terrible enough, and I can't imagine that. But, man, Constance has got to be mega unlucky to have 2, like, super evil mother-in-laws. Just oof. The first mother-in-law is so evil she kills her own kid. The second one's so evil she's just like making all kinds of fake news and everybody's buying it. I mean, when you use Twitter as your messenger, that's bound to happen. Act 3. Soon after this, King Alec came home to his castle and asked where his wife and child might be. The constable's heart grew cold, but he told him plainly all the circumstances you have already heard, and which I related as best as I can. He showed the king his seal and letter, saying, Sir, I have done exactly as you commanded me, upon pain of death. The messenger was tortured until he had named the places where he slept each night, and confessed everything from beginning to end. Thus, by skillful questioning and inference, they guessed the source of the mischief. I'm not sure how it was done, but the hand that wrote the letter was discovered, and all the venom of this accursed deed. In the upshot, you may read elsewhere, Allah slew his mother for her treachery. Thus, Donegild came to a bad end, and good riddance. No tongue can tell the sorrow that consumed Allah night and day for his wife and child. But now I return to Constance, who, so Christ willed, drifted upon the sea in privation and distress for 5 years, and more before her ship drew near to land. In the end, the sea cast up Constance and her child near a heathen castle, whose name I cannot find in my authorities. May Almighty God, who saved mankind, remember Constance and her child, once more, fallen into the hands of the heathen, and once more, as you will soon hear, at the point of death. Many come down from the castle to gaze upon Constance and the ship. In short, one night, the steward of the castle, a felon and a renegade, God's curse on him, came alone to the ship and told her he was going to be her lover, whether she would or no. The wretched woman was now in the greatest distress. Her child began crying. She herself burst into piteous tears. But the Blessed Mary came swiftly to her aid, for in the fierce struggle he suddenly pitched overboard, where retribution overtook him, and he drowned in the sea. And thus Christ kept Constance without spot. See the effect of the loathsome vice of lechery, which not only debilitates the mind, but actually destroys the body. Misery is its outcome, and that is its blind desires. How many one sees either killed or destroyed, not by the act, but by the intention to commit this sin. How could this feeble woman find the strength to defend herself from the renegade? There was Goliath with his immeasurable height. How could David pull him down? So young and scantily armored. How dare he look upon the fearsome countenance? Only through the grace of God, it is evident. Who gave Judith courage and who gave Judith courage and hardihood to slay Holofernes in his tent and thus deliver God's chosen people from their misery? My point is that just as God gave them strength and saved them from disaster, so did he give Constance strength and vigor. Now her ship passed through the narrow strait between Gibraltar and Ceuta, always driving on, sometimes west, sometimes north, sometimes south, or east. So basically she could go in circles. For many a weary day until Christ's mother, may she be blessed, in her never-failing goodness, contrived to bring the sorrows of Constance to an end. Now let us leave Constance for a while and speak of the Roman emperor, who had been informed by the letters from Syria of the massacre of the Christians and the dishonor done to his daughter by the snake in the grass. In other words, that damnable wicked sultaness who had them slain one and all at the banquet. For this the emperor dispatched his senators with a great number of other lords, splendidly equipped, to take full vengeance on the Syrians. For many a day they burned and slew and wrought havoc. But in the end they set their course homewards, and according to the story they were sailing in princely style in their victorious return to Rome. When they met up the ship driving along the forlorn Constance on board, the senator had no idea who she was or how she came to be in such a state. Nor would Constance, for the life of her, say anything about her rank and condition. He brought her to Rome and handed her and her young son over to his wife, and so she lived with the senator. And thus did Our Lady deliver Constance, like many others, out of trouble. There she was destined to live for a long time, occupied always with good work. And though the senator's wife was her aunt, for all that she was no better able to recognize Constance. I will not linger over this, but leave Constance in the care of the senator, while I return to King Allah, who was still sorrowful for his wife. To cut a long story short, one day Allah felt such great remorse for killing his mother that he came to Rome to submit himself to whatever penance the Pope might impose, and beseech Christ's forgiveness for the evil he had done. The couriers that went ahead of him brought the news, which soon spread throughout the town of Rome, that King Allah was coming upon a pilgrimage. Upon this, the senator, as was the custom, rode to meet him with many of his family, as much to impress him with his great magnificence as to show respect to a king. The noble senator and King Allah exchanged courtesies and entertained one another with great hospitality. A day or two later, it so happened that the senator went to a banquet given by the king. If I'm not mistaken, Constance's son was among his party. Now some say the senator brought the child along to the banquet at Constance's request. All these details are beyond my scope, but be that as it may, at any rate, he was there. For the truth is that by his mother's wish the child stood in the presence of Allah and looked upon the face of the king while they dined. Seeing the child, the king was struck with wonder, and later remarked to the senator, "Who is that handsome child standing over there?" "By God and St. John, I have no idea," the senator replied. "He has a mother, but no father that I know of." But after a moment or two, he told Allah how the child had been found. "And God knows," added the senator, "of all earthly women, married or virgin, I never saw or heard of one more virtuous than she in all of my life. For I dare venture, she would sooner have a knife through her breast than be a sinful woman. There is no man who could tempt her to that pass." Now this child was like Constance, as if it is possible for a creature to be. The face of Constance was fixed in Allah's memory. He began to wonder if by any chance the child's mother might be his wife. With a secret sigh, he left the table as quickly as he could. By heaven, am I imagining things? By all reasonable standards, I should believe my wife is at the bottom of the sea. But a moment later he argued, How do I know but that Christ may have brought my wife hither across the sea, just as he brought her from my own land, from whence she came? And in the afternoon Allah went home with the senator to see this miraculous chance might be so. The senator paid it every honor and sent in haste for Constance. When she understood why she was being sent, for you may easily believe that she was in no mood to dance. Indeed, she could scarcely stand upon her feet. When Allah saw his wife, he greeted her courteously, and then broke down. For with his first glance he knew it was really she, and for her part sorrow rooted her to the spot as dumb as a tree. Her heart shut up in her pain as she remembered his unkindness. Twice she fainted before his eyes while he wept and tried to explain in broken tones, "May God and all his glorious saints have mercy on my soul! For I am as guiltless as all of the harm done to you, as Maurice, my son, whose face is the image of yours. Let the fiend seize me where I stand." Their tears and anguish did not soon subside, and it was long before their sad hearts found relief. It was heartbreaking to hear them weep, and weeping increased their sorrow. But I must ask you to release me from my task, for I haven't got all day to depict their grief, and I am getting tired of describing these melancholy scenes. But when in the end the truth was known, that Allah was guiltless for her suffering, I suppose they kissed 100 times over, and between them was a happiness such as no creature had ever seen since the world began, save only that joy which is eternal. Then she humbly begged her husband as a repayment for her long and grievous suffering, to make a special invitation to her father, asking him to vouchsafe to do him the honor to come and dine. And she begged him not on any account to say a word to her father about her. She would claim that the child Maurice delivered this message to the emperor, but I imagine Allah was not so foolish as to send a child to one of the sovereign honor, such as he. The glory of Christendom, it seemed better to suppose that he went himself. The emperor courteously consented to come and dine as he was asked. And I have read that he looked intently upon the child and thought of his daughter. Then Allah returned to his lodging, Then Allah returned to his lodging, and as was proper, made all arrangements he could think of in preparation for this banquet. When the day came, Allah and his wife made themselves ready and rode joyfully forth to meet the emperor. Then Constance saw her father in the street. She alighted, throwing herself at his feet, and exclaimed, "Father, have you clean forgot your young child? I am your daughter Constance, whom you sent to Syria long ago. Father, it is I, who was thrust alone upon the sea and doomed to perish. Now, dear father, I cry you mercy, do not again send me to the heathen, but thank my husband here for his kindness." Who could describe the affecting joy between the three of them at this meeting? But I must make an end to my tale, for the day is quickly passing, and I'll delay no longer. These happy people set themselves down to the banquet, where I shall leave them in joy and delight, 1,000-fold happier than I can tell. Their child Maurice was afterwards made emperor by the Pope. He led a Christian life and brought great glory to the Church. But I'll let his story go by default, as my tale only dealt with Constance. You can find Maurice's life in the old Roman histories. For myself, I have forgotten it. King Allah chose this time and returned to England by the quickest way, taking with him his sweet and saintly wife Constance, and there they lived in happiness and in peace. But I promise you, earthly happiness lasts only a short while. Time will not stay, but changes like the tide, turning from day to night. Whoever lived for a single day in complete happiness, unmoved by either conscience, anger, desire, envy, pride, passion, injury, or fear of some sort. I only saw this to point out that Allah's bliss with Constance lasted only a little while in joy and content, for death, who takes toll of high and low, snatched King Allah out of this world. About a year had passed. Constance mourned him deeply, and may God bless his soul. To wind up the story, she made her way to Rome, where this saintly creature found her friends sound and well. Her adventures were over, but when she encountered her father, she fell upon her knees on the ground, weeping tender tears, yet with happiness in her heart, giving praises to God 100 times over. They lived in virtue, dispensing holy alms, and never again parted. Thus they lived until death divided them. Now farewell, for my tale is ended. May Jesus Christ, who has the power to send joy after grief, keep us in his grace, and guard all who are here. The end. So the Sergeant tale, he tells an interesting tale. He tells a tale of a person just moved by the whims of fate, and basically similar to, like, I guess the Sergeant tells a very typical, I guess, Christian tale of people just being people, and then God doing everything. Whereas like God does all his miracles, and then people just be people. And so Constance is just another person in that realm. And what's interesting is that the sergeant kind of lumps Constance with all these other like biblical figures like David and Daniel and so forth, and that in these kind of stories, and the story that really comes to mind when you think of these kind of stories is like Lord of the Rings. And I mean, J.R. Tolkien kind of wrote Lord of the Rings this way, where at the end of the day, it's really like God is the hero of the story, but since God is God, and he doesn't go through like human problems the way people do, we're told through the lens of people. And so let's use Lord of the Rings as the example. In Lord of the Rings, Providence and God, or Eru, is the God in the Lord of the Rings world. Eru is ultimately the hero of the story of Lord of the Rings. Because even though, like, yeah, we have Frodo carrying the ring, we have Aragorn take his place as king, we have Gandalf who brings the armies of the West, none of them actually deliver the final blow to Sauron and to evil. Gandalf doesn't actually, like, deliver a decisive blow against Sauron. Aragorn, even though he reclaims his place as king, he doesn't really do much outside of lead a few guys in a suicide mission to buy Frodo time. And then, of course, when Frodo gets to Mount Doom and he has the opportunity to throw the ring into the fire, Frodo himself fails. But of course, it's like the plot convenient moment where Gollum shows up, and after Gollum rips off Frodo's finger to try and get the ring, Gollum slips. He slips, and then he falls into the lava with the ring. And then the ring is destroyed that way. But what really happens in Lord of the Rings is that it really is just like God plays out an epic for evil to be beaten. And so the Constance story is kind of like that, where Constance is just kind of she's kind of like this victim just moved from place to place and going through all kinds of misfortunes. But in the end, it's God does a bunch of things through this story. And so it's kind of like, it's kind of weird to think that, like, yeah, God allows, and this is one of those like a story to kind of tackle that question. You know, you deal with this all the time where people are like putting their resistance against Christianity, and they talk about how, like, well, how can God allow evil? And one of the answers to that is, well, God allows evil so that good can shine and overcome it. And so you think of, like, in this story, the Sergeant's Tale, you know, we have some very evil characters. Like, I like how the sergeant just, like, he's like, man, I can't find words of how awful these women are, the two mother-in-laws. And he's like, I can't use words to describe how awful these people are. Like, that's how evil they are. Like, beyond mustache twirlingly evil. But there's opportunity that God uses, if you will, to have these people face justice. And so both of these women are, like, killed off, and in pretty gruesome fashion, because, I mean, when they commit the kind of evil that they do, they kind of had it coming. And so there's the Sergeant's Tale kind of just tells this old tale, just kind of contextualized to his audience, I guess, you know, to medieval peasants. But it's still a story about how God is always giving his providence to help his people. And I mean, and of course the close association with, like, Constance with other biblical figures. This story of Constance is told in a way that it would fit in with just another Bible story, if you will. That's kind of the nature of these kind of stories, where we talk about how, like, God is ultimately the main plot device, if you will. But at the same time, it shows that God has a compassion for humans. And so Constance's life, even though she went through like the craziest adventure, she still gets to be home with her friends and live a nice, comfortable life. I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? That's the dream, is to have a nice, comfortable life. But at the same time, Constance still had to go through all these other tribulations, and it was so, one, she would grow as a person, and two, other things that needed to be done, like the killing of these terrible people, the two mother-in-laws, as well as the corrupt knight who like kills an innocent woman and frames Constance for it. These people get their justice, and so it's one of those things that like these motifs kind of like, you know, transcend time and culture, and that's why Constance has this close association with biblical characters. And I think that's pretty well thought out story by the sergeant. So that's the sergeant's story. I'm just gonna read his epilogue because there's like a little bit more to the sergeant, but then we move on to the next character and the next tale. But we won't read that today. We're just gonna read the one story today because this is already a lot. Then our host stood up in his stirrups and exclaimed, "Listen, all of you, that was a tale worth hearing at any rate. God's bones. Master Parish Priest, tell us a story as you promised earlier. I can see you educated folk know a heap of good things." Well, bless us, said the parson. What makes the man swear so sinfully? Johnny, are you there? Returned the host. Listen to me, fellas. I smell a lollard in the wind. Just you wait. By God's holy passion, we'll have a sermon next. This lollard here means to preach a bit. Not by my father's soul that he shall not, said the sea captain. He shan't preach here. I'll have none of this gospel thumping and commentaries. All of us believe in God Almighty, continued the sea captain, but he'd only sow debate and scatter weeds among our good corn. And so I give you warning. Host, my jolly self, shall tell a tale that will ring the bell and awake you all up. But it won't be about philosophy, or philosophibility, or lawyers' mumbo-jumbo. There isn't much Latin in my gob. So that means next we're getting the sea captain's tale. Because originally, like, the host was like, "Oh, Mr. Parson, you know, are you ready to give your turn?" And the parson's like, "Sure, I guess, but, you know, you're dealing with the parson. And when you're dealing with a parson, you're going to have a wild ride." But the sea captain cuts him off. And so, we'll see what the sea captain has to tell for a story next Friday, as this is going to be the end of the stream. With that said, we'll just do a bit of housekeeping. Basically, next week we're going to have it's going to be a pretty regular schedule. We'll have our 2 Octopath Traveler streams, Monday and Wednesday at 2 o'clock Pacific time. Can you give two? No, that is not 2, that's 3. Can you lift 2 fingers? No, she can't do it. Okay, so 2 o'clock Pacific time on Monday and Wednesday, we will be doing our Octopath Traveler 2 streams. And then we'll have our Throwback Thursday video next Thursday, where I will be playing... Well, I just finished chapter 12, I think. So we're pretty... Oh, we gotta do that map next. Well, you'll have to watch next Thursday's Throwback Thursday to find out what map that is. And then, of course, next Friday we will read the Sea Captain's Tale. Maybe another tale if it's not too long after. But the Sea Captain's is, like, moderately long. It's like... It'll take us an hour to get through that story. Basically. Because this one took us, like, an hour and a half. So, the Captain's Tale is a little bit shorter, but it's, like, it's still pretty long. It's not like a short story. I mean, I guess all the stories are short stories, but his is not. His is a little bit, only a little bit shorter than the sergeant's. But I do like the sergeant's story quite a bit. It's a typical. People go through crazy things in life, and then like, God, Deus ex machina the whole way through, and it's always kind of fun to read those stories because you're just there for the wild adventure. And I mean, for short stories, you don't need like heavy character plot. It's just a short story to just keep people entertained. Anyway, that's it. So it's Good Friday, so I better get going. Gotta prep that Passover lamb. So I'm gonna head off now. I will see you guys on Monday for Octopath Traveler 2. Until then, I hope you guys have a great Friday night. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Happy Easter. I will probably say that again on Monday because it'll be Easter Monday. So it counts. So I'll probably say it again. But happy Easter. And I will see you guys on Monday. Mischief, say goodbye to everybody. No, she don't want to say bye. She don't like you. She doesn't like me, so she don't like you either. Cats are evil like that, right, Mischief? See, she's just like, get me out of here. I don't want to be seen by people. Anyway, happy Easter and God bless you.